Overhill Cherokee was the term for the Cherokee people located in their historic settlements in what is now the U.S. state of Tennessee in the southeastern United States, on the west side of the Appalachian Mountains. This name was used by 18th-century European traders and explorers from British colonies along the Atlantic coast, as they had to cross the mountains to reach these settlements. Situated along the lower Little Tennessee, lower Tellico, and lower Hiwassee rivers, the Overhill towns rose to prominence within the Cherokee Nation in the early 18th century, when they began to standardize trade with the British colonists. In the early part of the century, the Overhill towns' remote location at the far end of the trading path meant they were reached only by those traders and explorers adventurous enough to make the difficult journey to the interior over the mountain range. By the middle of the century, the Overhill towns were consistently courted by both British and French emissaries, as the two powers struggled for the control of the continent in the lucrative fur trade. During and following the American Revolutionary War, in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the westward thrust of Euro-American settlement led to the decline of the Overhill towns. The Cherokee were forced to cede most of their lands in this area through a series of unfavorable treaties with the United States, and they migrated to the south and west away from settler pressure for a time. The Overhill town of Chota, in present-day Monroe County, Tennessee, was recognized as the de facto capital of the entire Cherokee Nation for most of the 18th century, when it was the major settlement. The town of Tennessee became the namesake for the state of Tennessee. Many prominent Cherokee leaders, including Atacolicola, Oconostota, Nancy Ward, and Sequoyah, were born and raised in Overhill towns. In the 1970s, most of the former Overhill sites were submerged by the impoundment of the Little Tennessee River in a Tennessee Valley Authority project. But archaeologists conducted extensive excavations prior to this, during which they identified most of the Overhill towns and extracted thousands of artifacts, helping them develop volumes of invaluable information regarding the region's Cherokee and pre-Cherokee inhabitants. Different cultures of indigenous peoples had lived along the river for 12,000 years. The Overhill settlements were concentrated around three rivers at the base of the Great Smoky Mountains in the Unicoi Mountains, in what are now Monroe and Polk counties in Tennessee. The northernmost of these three rivers, the Little Tennessee, was the locus for a string of prominent Overhill settlements situated between modern-day Von Orr and Calderwood Dam. Other important settlements were situated along the Hiwassee River south of modern Etowah and along the Tellico River in modern Tellico Plains. Although Native Americans used most of the western side of the Great Smoky Mountains primarily as a hunting ground, early Euro-American explorers recalled abandoned villages and temporary hunting camps scattered around the region. These were often found in the game-rich coves of the northern part of the range and near the junctions of major streams. Mealoquo, Amelagua, located in present-day Monroe County, on a now-submerged island in the middle of the Little Tennessee River. This was just north of the modern U.S. Route 411 bridge. Mooney believed Mealoquo might have been the village of Nalok, which the naturalist John Bartram recorded visiting. The term Mealoquo means Great Island. 35.61534 degrees north, 84.24048 degree W/35.61534, minus 84.24048. Tuskegee, located at the confluence of the Tellico and Little Tennessee rivers south of modern-day Fort Loudon State Park. Tuskegee was the birthplace of Sequoyah, noted as the first person to independently create a written alphabet, which he did for the Cherokee language. 35.59167 degrees north, 84.20222 degree W/35.59167, minus 84.20222. Tomatley, located in present-day Monroe County, adjacent to Tahquah along the Little Tennessee River. Timberlake reported a council house in Tomatley that would sound a death hallow to signify the return of a war party. 35.57182 degrees north, 84.18697 degree W/35.57182, minus 84.18697. Tahquah, located in present-day Monroe County, at the confluence of Toco Creek and the Little Tennessee River, just south of modern-day Fort Loudon State Park. 35.56984 degrees north, 84.17248 degree W/35.56984. minus 84.17248. Tanasi, located in present-day Monroe County, adjacent to Chota along the Little Tennessee River. The town was the capital of the Overhill Cherokee circa 1721 to 1730. The Little Tennessee was originally simply called the Tennessee, which was an alternate spelling of Tanasi. European American settlers eventually applied the name to the entire state. 35.55005 degrees north, 84.13374 degree W/35.55005, minus 84.13374. Chota, it's a SA, located in present-day Monroe County, along the Little Tennessee River, about 10 miles, 16 kilometers, south of modern-day Von Orr. Chota was the de facto Cherokee capital in the mid-18th century, and birthplace of several prominent chiefs. At the time of Timberlake's visit in 1761, Chota consisted of a large council house, which could seat 500, and about 60 houses. The town's name is sometimes spelled Ikota. 35.55507 degrees north, 84.13104 degree W/35.55507, minus 84.13104. Sitico, Sitikong, located in present-day Monroe County, at the confluence of Sitico Creek and the Little Tennessee River. The town's name is sometimes spelled Setako. 35.54887 degrees north, 84.09891 degree W/35.54887, minus 84.09891. Chilhowie, Tsuluanui, located in present-day Blount and Monroe counties at the confluence of Abrams Creek and the Little Tennessee River. The junction of modern U.S. Route 129 and Foothills Parkway is nearby. 35.55231 degrees north, 84.00737 degree W/35.55231, minus 84.00737. Tallahassee, located in present-day Blount and Monroe counties along the Little Tennessee River, a mile or so downstream from the modern Calderwood Dam. The modern town of Tallahassee is situated much further downstream, and its location should not be confused with that of the ancient village. The Cherokee Tallahassee is sometimes referred to as Tallahassee Old Town. 35.50556 degrees north, 84.00028 degree W/35.50556, minus 84.00028. Great Tellico, Tahlequah, located in present-day Monroe County, in Tellico Plains, where the Tellico River levels out at the base of the Unicoi Mountains. Great Tellico rose to prominence in early 18th century under its chief Moitoi. Sir Alexander Cumming, who visited the town in 1730, reported that Great Tellico had the fiercest warriors of all the Overhill towns. Great Tellico's sister town, Chattooga, was also located in the valley. 35.36627 degrees north, 84.28745 degree W/35.36627, minus 84.28745. Great Hiwassee, located in present-day Po County, along the Hiwassee River at the base of the Unicoi Mountains, where the river levels into a fertile plain. The site has been developed as farmland. The term Hiwassee means savanna or plain. Hiwassee is sometimes called Hiwassee Old Town. 35.24314 degrees north, 84.58149 degree W/35.24314, minus 84.58149. The Overhill settlements were connected by a series of well-established Native American trails. The Great Indian Warpath ran parallel to the base of the Appalachians, connecting the Overhill settlements to Cherokee villages in Georgia and Virginia. The trading path, later called the Unicoi Turnpike, connected the Overhill towns with the middle settlements in North Carolina, the lower towns in South Carolina, and extended to Charleston, South Carolina. The Warriors Path connected Hiwassee Old Town, Great Tellico, and Chota. A branch of the Tuckaleechee and Southeastern Trail connected the Overhill towns along the upper Little Tennessee with the Kitawa towns in North Carolina via Tuckaleechee Cove, Cades Cove, and Econedley Gap, near Gregory Bald. The war trace ran from the upper Cherokee area, through southeast Kentucky, along Mason's Creek or Mace's Creek, in present-day Viper, Kentucky, passing through the Overhill towns and reaching the Georgia Cherokee towns. It also had connections to the Warriors Path and the Cumberland Gap, Tennessee area, and the Cherokee villages of Sullen Possum and Wildcat. Early Euro-American explorers in southern Appalachia noted that the Cherokee were concentrated around three general regions. The lower towns were centered on the town of Keowee in the hills of South Carolina and northeastern Georgia. The middle towns were centered on Nequassee and Tassachie amidst the Great Balsam Mountains and eastern Unicoi Mountains in western North Carolina. The Overhill Cherokee lived in settlements located between the Appalachian Mountains and the Tennessee Valley in what is now Tennessee. The Overhill capital, or mother town, shifted between Great Tellico, Tennessee, and Chodadop. The Overhill settlements were established sometime between the late 16th century and the late 17th century, although scholars disagree as to a more exact timeframe. The major towns were well settled by the time the first Euro-American explorers arrived in the late 17th century. The Overhill Cherokee were recognized as speaking a dialect distinctive from that found in the middle and lower towns, although all the people identified as Cherokee. For most of the 17th century, the British colonies on the Atlantic coast dealt with the Cherokee via representatives of other tribes acting as middlemen. As the fur trade expanded in importance with rising demand in European markets, traders and trappers went to the Overhill settlements for direct contact with the Cherokee and other western tribes. In 1673, Virginia merchants sent agents James Needham and Gabriel Arthur on a trip west of the Appalachians, hoping to open a direct trade route. While Needham was killed on the return trip, Arthur stayed behind. He later claimed to have accompanied the natives, possibly the Cherokee, on raids of Spanish settlements in Florida. In 1725, South Carolina sent Colonel George Chicken on a diplomatic mission to the Overhill towns to address the issue of unlicensed traders, who were underselling merchants conducting business legally. Chicken arrived in Great Tellico in July. He described the village as compact and thick-settled. The town and tribe had long competed in the region with the Creek tribe. Chicken followed the warrior's path north to the Little Tennessee River, where he met the head warrior of Tennessee and the chiefs of Sitico and Tallahassee. Sir Alexander Cumming arrived in Charleston, South Carolina, in December 1729. Although he lacked official diplomatic credentials, Cumming managed to convince several Charlestonians that he was an agent of King George II of Great Britain on a mission to gain the loyalty of the Cherokee. Cumming set out for the Overhill town of Tennessee in March 1730, his stated goal being to gain the fabled crown of Tennessee. Cumming moved quickly along the trading path, interacting briefly with lower and middle chiefs. In just under a month, Cumming had crossed the Unicorn Mountains into the Overhill country, a dangerous place at the time because of the Cherokee's ongoing war with the Creeks. Years later, colonial trader Ludovic Grant, who lived in Great Tellico and briefly accompanied Cumming during his tour, described Cumming's techniques. In each town, Cumming arranged a meeting with local Cherokee leaders. He arrived fully armed at the meeting at the town council house, in defiance of custom. There he made a prepared speech saying that he was a private citizen wishing only to see their country, and that if any Indians wished to return to England with him, he would take them. He asked them to join his party in a toast to the health of King George II, and to kneel in allegiance. He told his guides that he would have set fire to the townhouse and killed the assembled Indians if they refused. During his stay in Great Tellico, Cumming was impressed by the display of its chief Moitoy. He described the encounter in his journal, referring to his party in third person. They arrived at Great Tellico in the afternoon, saw the petrifying cave, a great many enemy scalps brought in and put upon poles at the warriors' doors, made a friend of the great Moitoy, and Jacob the conjurer. Cumming learned that Moitoy was trying to gain control of the entire Cherokee people, who were highly decentralized, with power associated with regional settlements. Cumming agreed to help Moitoy if the chief would help him get the crown of Tennessee. On March 30, 1730, Cumming followed the warrior's path from Great Tellico to Tennessee, which he found pleasantly situated along the Little Tennessee. Cumming met with the Tennessee warrior, whom he understood to be the de facto leader of the Overhill at the time. After gaining the Tennessee warrior's allegiance, Cumming returned to Great Tellico. He accompanied Moitoy back across the Unicorn Mountains to Hiwassee, and helped the chief be crowned as Emperor of the Cherokee. Cumming returned to England on June 5, 1730, accompanied by several Cherokee and carrying an opossum hair headdress, which he referred to as the Crown of Tennessee. Although he had planned to present the party and crown to King George II, a delegation from Charleston arrived claiming Cumming had defrauded them. While Cumming's schemes led to his own downfall, his visit to the Overhill towns helped to solidify an alliance between the Cherokee and the English. Around 1736, Christian Priber, a German utopian idealist, reached Great Tellico. Although initially working as a French agent, Priber quickly abandoned his mission. He adopted Cherokee customs, learned the language, and quickly gained the tribe's trust. Priber attempted to organize Cherokee society in accordance with early 18th century European idealism. He promoted the idea that all things should be held in common, including wives and children. Claiming the English were fraudulent and greedy, He suggested moving the Cherokee capital to modern-day Alabama, where it would be closer to the French colonial territory of La Louisiana. The English tried to arrest Priber in 1739 but were prevented by the Cherokee. He was finally captured by the Creek people in 1743 and turned over to South Carolina authorities. At the outbreak of the French and Indian War, the Cherokee aligned with the British. The Overhill towns agreed to provide military support but asked that a fort be built to protect the area's women and children while the warriors were away. In 1756, the colonies dispatched Captain Raymond Demir and engineer John DeBrom to the area with several wagon loads of supplies for the construction of a fort along the Little Tennessee River. The fort, named after John Campbell, 4th Earl of Loudoun, stood at the junction of the Little Tennessee and the Tellico rivers. The Cherokee village of Tuskegee developed in its vicinity. Shortly after the fort's construction, relations between the English and the Cherokee soured. Several Cherokee returning home from battle were killed by settlers, and an increase in horse thefts created tension in Virginia. After a contingent of Cherokee chiefs were detained at Fort Prince George in late 1759, the Cherokee, under Chief Standing Turkey, laid siege to Fort Loudoun. The fort's garrison held out until August 1760, when a lack of provisions forced them to surrender. The British colonies responded swiftly to the fall of Fort Loudoun. South Carolina sent Colonel James Grant against the lower towns. Virginia dispatched Colonel William Byrd to attack the middle towns in western North Carolina, and Colonel Adam Stephen detached from Byrd's regiment and marched to Long Island on the Holston, near modern-day Kingsport, Tennessee, with plans to attack the Overhill towns. The Cherokee immediately sued for peace, which was granted. To help solidify the peace, Colonel Stephen dispatched Lieutenant Henry Timberlake and Sergeant Thomas Sumter to accompany a Cherokee delegation on a tour of the Overhill towns. After a 5-day journey down the Holston, French Broad, and Little Tennessee rivers, Timberlake arrived in the Overhill town of Tomentley. There he was greeted by Ostinaco and witnessed a ceremonial return of a Cherokee war party. After smoking a peace pipe with Ostinaco, Timberlake proceeded southward to Chota, where he was met by some 400 Cherokee. Timberlake smoked a peace pipe with several tribal leaders and recorded the layout and design of the town's large council house. The following day, Timberlake arrived in the town of Tellico, where the residents greeted him with a long dance. After smoking a peace pipe with the town leader Chula, Timberlake proceeded southward to Chilhowie, where he gained similar assurances of peace. He returned via the trail to Long Island on the Holston. Timberlake's journals, published in the 1760s, contain detailed descriptions of Cherokee council houses, residences, canoes, and other facets of everyday Cherokee life. These were invaluable to historians. At the close of the 7 Years' War, Euro-American settlers began trickling into East Tennessee from the eastern colonies. In 1772, several pioneers negotiated a lease for Cherokee lands in northeast Tennessee and formed the Watauga settlement. In spite of the agreement, tensions between the pioneers and the Cherokee rose steadily. By the outbreak of the American Revolution, the Cherokee were allied with the British against the rebellious American colonies, hoping to push the encroaching settlers out of their territory. In 1776, the Cherokee initiated a plan to drive the settlers out of the Washington District, North Carolina, and invade Virginia. Virginia merchant Isaac Thomas, later a co-founder of Sevierville, was warned of the invasion by Nancy Ward, a Cherokee beloved woman. Thomas passed on the warning to the settlers, who prepared their defenses. The first prong of the attack, led by Dragging Canoe, was defeated by colonists at Heaton Station. The second prong, led by Abraham of Chilhowie, was routed at Fort Watauga. In response to these attacks, several thousand militia in two groups led by William Christian and General Griffith Rutherford invaded the Overhill towns and burned Tuskegee and Tellico. The major faction of the Cherokee made peace shortly thereafter, under the Treaty of DeWitt's Corner. In 1780, while the North Carolina militia from the Washington District, often referred to as the Overhill Militia, were away at the Battle of Kings Mountain, the Cherokee launched sporadic raids against the settlers there. Upon his return, Colonel John Sevier, who had gained fame as a co-commander at Kings Mountain, was dispatched, along with several thousand militia, to the south on a punitive expedition to the Overhill towns. After defeating the Cherokee in a fierce battle at Boyd's Creek, in modern-day Sevier County, Sevier proceeded southward. He destroyed most of the remaining, lightly defended villages, including the capital of Chota. After the Cherokee defeats at Heaton Station in Fort Watauga in 1776, Most Cherokee chiefs, including Tellico and Oconostota, signed the Treaty of DeWitt's Corner. Dragging Canoe and Ostinaco refused to recognize this treaty, claiming the settlers were unlikely to abide by the treaty's terms. Along with several renegade tribesmen from across the Cherokee tribes, they moved south to Chickamauga Creek, in the vicinity of what is now Chattanooga, and set up a series of villages. Settlers called them the Chickamauga Cherokee after their location and to distinguish them from the greater Cherokee tribes. The Chickamauga, or Lower Cherokee as they were also sometimes called, proceeded to carry on an unconventional war against the encroaching Euro-American settlers, ambushing small patrols and attacking small settlements. After Oconostota's death in the early 1780s, Chief Old Tassel was recognized as the leader of the Overhill Cherokee. He sought more distance from the Chickamauga. After an expedition by Sevier destroyed the Chickamauga towns in 1782, Dragging Canoe moved the Chickamauga southwest to modern-day Marion County, Tennessee, where he continued his struggle. After the assassination of Old Tassel in 1788, Chief Hanging Maw was recognized as the leader of the Overhill towns. With violence spiraling out of control, Hanging Maw petitioned Territorial Governor William Blount for a fort to protect the peaceful Overhill villages from vengeful settlers. In 1794, Hanging Maw donated land at the junction of 9 Mile Creek and the Little Tennessee River to the U.S. government for the construction of the Tellico blockhouse. Along with a small garrison of federal soldiers, the Tellico blockhouse was the headquarters of the Tellico agent, William Blount, the official liaison between the U.S. and the Cherokee. On November 8, 1794, Blount met Hanging Maw, representing the Overhill Cherokee, and John Watt, representing the Lower Cherokee, to sign a treaty ending the Cherokee-American Wars. Over the next 10 years, the U.S. made several other treaties with the Cherokee, persuading Cherokee leaders to cede large portions of land in East and Middle Tennessee, including the Overhill towns along the Little Tennessee, in an attempt to gain peace. With the cession of Overhill lands, the Cherokee Nation's center of power shifted south to New Dakota in Georgia. Settlers migrating throughout the southeast kept up pressure to gain Cherokee lands. In 1967, the Tennessee Valley Authority began construction on Tellico Dam just above the mouth of the Little Tennessee. The impoundment created Tellico Lake and effectively flooded all of the original known Overhill sites along the Little Tennessee River. Before the flooding, the University of Tennessee conducted extensive archaeological excavations, identifying Chota's townhouse and the grave of Oconostota. The site of Chota's townhouse was covered with fill, raising it above water levels. A monument with 8 pillars, one for the Cherokee Nation and each of its 7 clans, was placed at the site along with the reinterred grave of Oconostota. Nearby, a small monument was erected marking the site of Tennessee and recalling it as the root of the state's name. Both sites are managed by the eastern band of the Cherokee. Further upstream, Chilhowee Dam was named after the now submerged site of Chilhowee. Tennessee Reservoir Development Agency, TRDA, boat ramps have been named after the submerged former sites of Toccoa and Tallahassee. Abrams Creek, which traverses Cades Cove and empties into the Little Tennessee, is named after Chief Abraham of Chilhowee. In the 20th century, Fort Loudon was reconstructed by state teams, as well as a replica of a 17th-century village dwelling of Tuskegee. These are located within the Fort Loudon State Park. The state park also manages the Tellico blockhouse site, the foundations of which have been identified and marked. The Sequoia Birthplace Museum, near Fort Loudon in Von Orr, is dedicated to the creator of the Cherokee alphabet. The Unicoi Trail, a cross-country hiking trail, now connects the Sequoia Museum with Murphy, North Carolina, roughly following the ancient trading path. The Frank H. McClung Museum at the University of Tennessee contains hundreds of Cherokee artifacts obtained from various excavations which the university has conducted in the Tennessee Valley over the past century. Moitoi of Tellico, circa 1687 to 1760, headman at Great Tellico at the time of Cumming's visit. Old Tassel, Ananosiptai, circa 1700 to 1788, headman of Toccoa. Ostinaco, circa 1700 to 1780, head chief, Tomatley, at the time of Timberlake's visit. Atacolicola, seed point 1710-1777, born in Chota. Oconostota, circa 1710 to 1783, born and died in Chota. Jacob the Conjurer, FLCA 1730, in Great Tellico at the time of Cumming's visit. Dragging Canoe, circa 1738 to 1792, born in Chota, one-time headman of Great Island Town. Nancy Ward, circa 1738 to 1824, born in Chota. John Watts, 1753 to 1802, nephew of Old Castle, leader of the Chickamauga/Lower Cherokee after dragging canoe, died in 1792. Moitoy of Tellico, 1759 to 1761, began the Anglo-Cherokee War. Sequoia, circa 1767 to 1843, born in Tuskegee. Savannah, participated in the 1776 offensive into the Washington District, North Carolina, served as headman of the Overhill 1780 to 1781. Abraham of Chilhowie, or Abram, died in 1788, led Cherokee assault against Fort Watauga in 1776,